I'm Steve Rosenbaum, and this is Hacking TV with Saul Hansel.
And we are back again this week to take stock of a whole bunch of things happening in the video and television world, starting with the grand festival of self-indulgence, the Emmy Awards. Steve, you watch these things as an insider a lot more than I do. What did you make of this week's show, this year's show?
It's a complicated show this year because, you've got Netflix and Amazon nipping at the heels of the old established television business. And, HBO, which has always been thought of as the insurgent, is now the savior of the television business. I mean, everyone loves HBO, and HBO was the big winner. I mean, HBO won a lot of Emmys.
Do you think they won more than their fair share? Are the voters voting their hearts and not their technical analysis, or did they actually earn all those awards?
Well, it's not really a fair measure because it's a little like saying there's, television budgets and HBO budgets have never been, comparable. And the reason why people always complained about HBO winning everything was that, HBO would come in and literally, paper the budgets with these big numbers. And the television people were like, it's just not fair. I mean, we just don't have, it's not a fair competition. And now, the Netflix Amazon battle makes it all very interesting.
Well, basically, Netflix and Amazon are saying we're going to follow the HBO playbook and not, the discount, AMC playbook or something like that, because they're trying to make a name for themselves and they've got crazy stock prices and a lot of cash. So the winner, right, is people who like expensive television, because now you have even more of it to pick from.
But like, for example, Jon Hamm won his first Emmy last night. He'd had 7 losses. And I'm thinking to myself, and it was the first acting Emmy for Mad Men. And I'm like, how did that happen? Like, the show was very well received critically. Everyone watched it. It was very popular. How did Jon Hamm not win? Not that he needs any sympathy from me, but I woke up thinking, after you lose 4 or 5 times in a row, going out to rent that tux for the 5th or 6th, you got to be like, really? Do I have to do this? Like, I'm going to lose. I mean, he lost 7 times.
And why do you think that was?
Well, I don't know. I don't vote for the Emmys. Just to be clear, I'm a Producers Guild member, PGA, and I vote for the PGA Awards. And these are complicated voting mechanisms. They are. You've got lots of memberships of these organizations that have been extraordinarily productive in their careers but are older. And so you've got some biases there, and you've got Transparent won again because the transgender community is definitely getting a lot of support from Hollywood, but things that are thought of as kind of mass popular shows often don't win.
And so what does this mean if you're a studio executive or a network executive looking at all of this? What are you going to invest in more or less going into next year? It's an excellent question.
It does make you think, like, so does Reed Hastings take away from this? Like, what's the lesson here? And I would guess if what you're looking is to be the gold standard of excellence, you're looking for things that either embrace subject matter that the Emmy voters are going to and the critics are going to love, or you're going to embrace things that are very edgy, or are going to break new ground. But it does beg the question. The only thing that I think Netflix won for was Orange is the New Black. That's pretty edgy stuff.
When you think about where we're going, right, if we're moving into, let's say, a partially a la carte world. So right now, you buy HBO, Netflix, a la carte. Who the hell knows whether you actually are buying Amazon or not, Amazon Prime Video. Everything else is in a bundle. But suddenly, you can buy CBS a la carte or not, and you're going to, increasingly be able to buy other things. Once you get there, you have a different economics because the publisher, the network, makes money like a magazine publisher does. People don't have to read the magazine for them to make money. They just have to mean to read the magazine and then renew, think either they got enough value from it or this year they're really going to read it when it comes time to renew. Same thing with Netflix or HBO. So in that context, having buzz is more important than, say, for a network, which ultimately lives and dies by how many people actually watch, which is a different phenomenon.
Listen, I think the thing that's really interesting and confusing and complicated about the world we now live in is, if you're used to spending 90 or $100 on television and you're already paying your cable bill, chances are, your family is reasonably well off, you can feed your kids, you can buy shoes. If that goes to 110 or 130, maybe, but not 300. So there's a finite amount of dollars that are going to feed more mouths and are hungry. And I don't have a good answer as to, what that end game is and whether or not, quote unquote, quality shows are going to be covered or whether or not they're going to end up being, essentially loss leaders. I mean,
it's a good question,
yeah.
But if you have at least one scenario goes the low end, the stuff for the upper reaches of the digital cable, right? The Discovery Tropical Fish Channel.
Love that channel.
But yeah, absolutely. The Byzantine History Channel and all of those wonderful things that gets replaced by YouTube, right? There was a strategy that worked for a couple of decades where all the networks multiplied out and did really cheap reality and repackaging and reruns, and that all disappears, and you pay for fewer things, but those things are better because the bundling works different. That's could be different, but that's I think as likely a scenario as any.
Yeah, and it raises all kinds of questions about middle market, nice to have but not must have channels.
I'm sitting here trying to redo the cable in our house. We've got Fios, and their new plan is a half a step towards a la carte. They give you 6 10-channel subject packages, a news one, a sports one, a hardcore sports one, pop culture, kids, and you pick 2 for the base price, then $10 a month for each additional package. And that the main thing that does is it means you don't have to pay for ESPN if you don't watch it.
I just want to say that sounds like such a really fun experience you just described. That really must be a really pleasurable sitting there and clicking and checking and choosing. Sounds horrible.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, because among other things, they locked me into a contract that I didn't actually sign up for, and I'm trying to undo that so that I can have a free hand to negotiate, because basically I have to stand up and threaten to quit to go to Comcast because they, it's like buying a rug in the bazaar in Baghdad, right? I mean, you have to, threaten to quit or else you don't get the good renewal packages. And everybody has to degrade themselves to do business.
If we have time at the end of the show, I'll tell you my almost identical story with buying a phone. But let's jump. There's more consolidation to talk about, so let's jump forward. Shocking that Cablevision sold. Shocking to me.
Why is it shocking? Everybody else is selling in that business.
Yeah, but the family's not no one's retiring. James is, they've got all these interlocking relationships between Madison Square Garden and the Knicks and Radio City Music Hall and all the cable channels, and it just seems like it was a unbelievably prolific money printing machine. Now, they did get offered a really big number, right? It's $9 billion, and then with debt, it's like $17 billion or something like that. By the way, I offered $7 billion. He turned me down.
There you go. So, everybody has a price, and I think there's a very interesting debate about the future of distribution, the wires versus the content. So
the buyer is a French-Israeli billionaire.
Yep.
Patrick, I'm going to mispronounce his last name. Drahai?
And, who's got access to capital, who's building up scale. There's always somebody. And you can make an argument that scale matters in that business. The argument that if you're going to be bargaining for distribution rights, right? If you have even more competition from upstarts like Netflix, the more clout you have theoretically, the more customers you can aggregate, the better you're going to be. That doesn't mean that he's paying the right amount of money. I would rather be the seller than the buyer, because I think that business becomes more of a commodity business on the distribution side, and I think that Madison Square Garden is, you're not going to go build another basketball stadium in Midtown, right?
By the way, I'm not debating that it wasn't a good deal. I'm just trying to figure out, it came, so by surprise. I mean, when everyone was arguing over Time Warner Cable, there wasn't a word mentioned that Cablevision was on the block. I mean, I would have presumed there was going to be some kind of an auction, but it appears there wasn't an auction. There was.
I think many people in the cable business for decades assumed that whenever the Dolans got tired, they would sell to Time Warner because it's such an obvious fill-in for that New York footprint. And so it may be that with Time Warner going off in a different direction, right? When Time Warner was going to go to Comcast, the Dolans had to say, the government is definitely not going to allow us to sell to the combined Comcast Time Warner, so that may have gotten them going, or the Comcast or the Time Warner Charter deal. Then, so I don't, you don't know what puts this stuff in play, but it's we will see. The Altice, the company, says that they're not done, and they're interested in buying. I mean, they own both wireless and cable companies, and they're making noises like they may want to buy a wireless company in the U.S., which basically means T-Mobile, or a couple of little bits and pieces that aren't worth buying.
I guess. I mean, let's not do cell phones on this podcast because my head will explode. I've had a very tough cell phone. Let's talk about Facebook. So Facebook made an announcement that they were building a video app, and it got reported one way, but I, before the show, was arguing that I think actually there's a very different story there, and it matters to the space we're in, and VR is part of it, but not the play.
So Facebook owns Oculus, and it's essentially Mark Zuckerberg's, self-driving car. It's his bet on something that is only very tangentially related to what Facebook does, that he thinks is the future, and they've got enough money and clout that he can go gamble on that, and we can talk about what that's going to be. But I think you're saying that there's a much more near-term agenda they have in video. So walk us through how this app, or an app, isn't just a virtual reality thing for the future, but it's something that's going to affect TV potentially much sooner.
Look at it this way. So you go to Facebook now, and they've made it very clear they want to win in video. They pulled out all the stops. They're going after YouTube. Their back end is growing every day. Their numbers are great, but they're fundamentally taking every piece of video that anyone uploads to Facebook, and they're funneling it into this narrow slot called the newsfeed, which is not a very easy way to consume video. I was on the phone with a friend of mine at Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and I said, if you really want to compete with YouTube, you need to have something that looks like a channel selector so that I can say, I'm interested in seeing videos about, cute cats, or I'm interested in seeing videos about sports teams, or I'm interested in seeing videos about, Donald Trump saying stupid stuff. And until you have something that looks more like YouTube, with search and the ability to click on things and the ability to organize them and this friend of mine simply said, I have no comment.
Well, I keep thinking about the way I look at media is like, what kind of frame of mind is the person in when they sat down to pick up whatever device they're using. What was the urge? Conscious, unconscious, productive, distracting. And Facebook got to 1 billion users a day because that quick hit stream of the news feed turns out to be a very powerful urge. It's a thing, they invented a particular form of crack that's a little bit different than the YouTube crack. They have some things in common, but they're very different than a lot of television.
Friend Shelley Palmer calls snackable.
Right. Well, it's not just snackable. It's the kind of stream, right? So there's all kinds of places you might just see one little something, but the fact that you're diving into this stream, and a stream of unrelated items has no beginning, it has no end, it isn't programmed in any sense of the way a media person would think about programming a TV network or a magazine, but it has its own arcs and rhythms to it, and it's one of the key formats of our age. Facebook owns the biggest and most important stream, and there's kinds of places that video is fitting in there, but the best video in a stream is even shorter than a YouTube clip. There are things that are quick, that are part of a self-expression or a did you see that, and you go on to the next thing and you go on to the next thing. That's the thing they own, right?
So mostly I think you're right about things, but in this case I think you're entirely wrong. And I think if you look at the history of Facebook, they spin things off, whether it's Instagram or Messenger. I mean, when they moved chat out of the Facebook page and onto its own app, Messenger, nobody was happy about that. Nobody said, oh, that's a great feature. Like, nobody said, oh, I want to sign up for Messenger. But one of the things Zuckerberg is really smart about is figuring out when he wants an experience to both be inside the app and also live next to it.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. That would be crazy not to do a brand extension to figure out what else can they do in video, right? I think that, I still feel like connected TVs and slightly more passive experiences, so if they can figure out the socially curated, slightly slower, a little bit more lean back experience, that's one that's there for them. If you think that the duplicating YouTube also, search is complicated in the context.
Hold on one second. I would never ever suggest that what they're doing is duplicating YouTube. All I'm saying is, if you think their video app is I think they're smart enough to know the number of their users that use VR, is less than 1% of their base. It's tiny. The number of their users that use video is enormous and growing. And I think, the original headline that came out said Facebook to spin off video app, and then if you dug into it, the Journal and a bunch of other people talked about it as being focused on VR. And I just think we'll see when it comes out. Those
are Facebook, which has lots of apps, in as you say, has lots of business. So there's a video business initiative, business unit that's in the middle of how they're going to make a lot more money, and then there's the long-term bet about virtual reality. Though I assume they don't have anything to do with each other. So it's as likely as not as there's 2 or maybe 12 video apps being developed, but they don't. No one is saying, do we do virtual reality or do we do snackable videos for the 1 billion users a day? They have to maximize what they can do with video, because there's $70 billion just in the U.S. of TV commercials that's in play here. Facebook is closer to network TV than anything that the networks own. So if they can stick commercials in front of a billion people who are watching them already for half an hour a day, they can make 100 times more money.
By the way, I know that we hadn't necessarily thought about talking about this on the show today, but I think we got to take a minute to talk about iOS 9.
Okay, ad blocking.
Well, iOS 9 in a couple of ways. Ad blocking, I wrote about for Forbes this morning. But the first thing is that the iOS 9 News app, is actually really lovely.
In what way? I find it completely useless.
I don't want to go to Facebook. I don't want Facebook to be the only thing I look at when I'm on my phone and I want to know what's going on, because I feel like it doesn't do a very good job of giving me any filters. So I'm watching somebody's baby pictures, and then I'm watching somebody's dying, and then I'm watching something funny, and it confuses me. And so I'd like to be able to say, you know what, the Pope's coming to New York. I want to read some national news about the Pope in Cuba today. Thank you very much. And to me, by the way, it's not perfect. It's too texty, and it doesn't have any video yet, and it's not photo-y. But I thought it was I was able to choose brands I trust, New York Times, Wired, a couple of others, and very quickly have a nice little accessible synopsis from brands that I've curated into my feed. And I thought that was...
Maybe I haven't put enough time in it, but when I set it up, and I don't find the top 5 things that they show me the top 5 things that I want to be shown. It has too many random features. It has too much old stuff. It's not a substitute for asking the question, so what's important that's going on today?
I didn't think it was perfect, but I thought ad blocking... I think the politics around ad blocking are going to make my publisher friends' heads explode. I think that I'm surprised that Apple is being as kind of sanguine about making a change like that. I mean, what I wrote about today was, if one of the major music labels had said, we're going to embrace Napster, what would have happened in the music business? But in fact, they did the opposite, and they said, we're going to sue the hell out of Napster, and they put it out of business. I see Apple as embracing ad blocking as the equivalent of telling people that knew secretly they were breaking some rule, no, it's okay. You really don't, which I think is shocking.
There's the flip side of that is Apple has to constantly be thinking about the antitrust implications of the tight control that it has. And if you make the case that a browser in sort of the established sense on a PC is, and all of the browsers, including Google's, are open to ad blockers, and Apple wants to get into the advertising business even more, they are, you could make the case, I haven't talked to an antitrust attorney on this, that if they continue to ban ad blockers while they get bigger in advertising, they're opening themselves up to, a restraint of trade and unfair competition kind of situation. And so they may be forced to do that. I mean, I think that which I think is good. I mean, the fact that the ethics of computers, the ethics of the openness of the PC have been very good for lots of people. They enabled Napster, right? You couldn't have had Napster on the iPad without the PC, right? And I think that the fact that Apple at least has part of it that's being pulled towards open, even though lots of it wants to go closed, is a force for goodness in the world.
All right, so we have time for one more subject.
Okay.
So let's talk about the BBC.
The BBC. Here's a company that a year ago or 2 years ago said, we aren't big enough to make it in the U.S. market, so we're going to sell a big chunk of our channel to AMC that will sell ads for us, and we're going to reduce our exposure to the U.S., giving them a whole bunch of rights to things. And then they say, oh, there's an over-the-top market. Even though we knew that because we built the iPlayer, which is the most successful over-the-top product in the universe, we didn't think about that 2 years ago. We have all this other stuff. We're going to go build a fee-based service and offer it in the U.S., except if you subscribe to BBC's fee-based over-the-top service, you don't get Sherlock, you don't get Downton Abbey, you don't get all the things that are the flagships of the BBC, because those are sold to PBS and then to this AMC venture. And so they'll have something, but the value of, all the old BBC stuff without anything you've ever heard of is going to be pretty low.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think it's interesting. I think you're seeing more and more people showing up on the OTT. By the way, was there a price? Did they say what they were going to charge?
No, they haven't announced a price. But I assume everybody in the cable business is building an OTT product. Why wouldn't you? If CBS can do it, everybody can do it. And everybody will. These guys would rather have a direct relationship with their customers, right?
We are out of time. Another fabulous half hour. Mr. Hansel, thank you so much.
It is a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And keep on hacking, and we will see you on YouTube and SoundCloud and Stitcher and Waywire and lots of other places. And please tell your friends. And we'll be back next week with more over-the-top OTT hacking TV news.
See you next week.